And here we go. Operation Epic Fury began on February 28, 2026 at approximately 1:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The offensive strike was launched by the United States Central Command under the direction of President Donald Trump in coordination with Israeli forces, targeting Iranian military infrastructure and leadership. Following previous military engagements to destroy Iranian nuclear facilities in Operation Midnight Hammer, President Trump made several public announcements that Iran had failed to concede on the issue of building nuclear weapons. Trump issued stern warnings of military consequences, along with a deadline if Iran did not comply. To show he was serious, Trump engulfed the waters around Iran with U.S. Navy vessels, including 2 aircraft carriers. Iran thought the president was bluffing and continued to stall the negotiations. The Trump administration officials began calling out the Iranians. The precision strikes from the United States and Israel were aimed at dismantling Iran's security apparatus, including Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps command and control centers, air defense system, and the missile and drone launch sites, including military airfields. The Israelis targeted Iranian leadership personnel, and the Americans pursued the Iranian infrastructure. Reports indicate that Iran's supreme leader was killed. Operation Epic Fury is one of the most technically advanced and highly choreographed campaigns in military history, with over 150 advanced fighter aircraft involved, as well as Tomahawks, HIMARS, high-tech jamming equipment, and new one-way drones. The USS Gerald R. Ford is one of the most advanced aircraft carriers in the world. The Iranians responded by launching missiles at U.S. military bases across the Middle East. Some of the Iranian missiles hit civilian targets. It appears that the impacted nations are supporting the efforts of the U.S. and Israeli collaboration. President Trump issued another statement warning the Iranians not to escalate the conflict, even suggesting that Iran could come back to the negotiating table. The Israeli government openly stated that the objective is regime change in Iran. There is a clear directive that the U.S. and Israel are after complete supremacy of the skies over Iran. The initial response from NATO allies has been tepid. China and Russia issued modest condemnation. The greatest threat to President Trump's efforts will come from the Democrats in Congress. We will discuss all this and more with our 2 subject matter experts on such military endeavors. Thank you for joining us at Editorial Interchange. And welcome to Editorial Interchange. We're going to discuss some of the latest events related to the conflict with Iran. The Israelis are helping us out in this endeavor. And I just happen to have 2 friends of mine who are very adept subject matter experts in this type of thing. Both of them have served honorably with their U.S. Armed Forces and are very familiar with some of the aircraft, materials, logistics, all these things that go into an operation like Operation Epic Fury. And I'd like to introduce Bob Ross and Dennis Benson. And gentlemen, if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about your experiences, and then we'll get into a discussion about what's happening in Iran.
Thank you, Steve, and happy to be on the program with you and your listeners today. I was fortunate in having been selected to serve on the Joint Staff at the Pentagon just prior to the first Gulf War. So I had a bird's eye view of the lead up to it, the deployments, the execution, as well as the logistics that supported the whole operation. And it was very complex, just as Epic Fury is, and be happy to share some of those observations and insights with you and the audience.
I'm Dennis Benson. I served as a Navy captain in the United States Navy. I was on destroyers for years as an anti-submarine warfare expert. Then I went to put on my Navy aviator wings and flew P-3s, again, doing anti-submarine warfare. And I've done extensive wargaming with the military and simulations and all these things here, and should be able to give some insight into what's going on here. So glad to be here, Steve.
Great. Well, thanks, gentlemen. And let's start off by saying, obviously, this is not the first foray that in Iran that the United States and Israel have had. Just recently, we had the Operation Midnight Hammer. You would have thought with the military might that was exposed during that operation with those 30,000-pound crusher bombs that they dropped out of those B-2s, that Iran would have probably had a very sober look at the negotiations. And unfortunately, it didn't seem like they really took that seriously, and they had kind of stalled in their talks. Do you think that they were just stalling for time and waiting for the Democrats to hound Trump and get him out of the situation? What do you think the situation was? Why did Iran leave themselves open?
I think their position of death to America, death to Israel. We want to reassert ourselves as the leading kingdom in the Middle East is baked into the DNA of the leaders that are making those decisions. And to expect them to change and say, hey, we've been wrong since 1979, we're going to mend our ways and join the world community, would be akin to somebody walking into a mass on a Sunday morning and citing some scientific facts and say, and therefore, you should all just recognize that this faith is misplaced, get up and leave. They're not going to do that, and neither of those Iranian extremists.
And of course, they're stalling for time. And you got to realize who you're dealing with. There's two things here. One, you're dealing with a dictatorship. And a dictatorship has to look strong to the people that are supporting them up, because if they lose that support, they can be very, very fragile. And also, you got to look at this is a theocracy. They believe they're doing their version of God's will. And nobody's crazier than somebody that's crazy for God. And they will do the most ludicrous things in the name of their God. And that's what they're doing here. Hey, they think they're doing God's will. And there is no way they're going to surrender to Satan. It's not going to happen.
And let's break some things down, because I know we're going to have some people watching who are not familiar with the nomenclature of the armed forces and maybe have not been exposed to anything like that. So could you break down, we're starting with President Trump as the supreme officer in charge of things. He comes down to the Secretary of the Defense, Hegseth. That goes down to the Joint Chiefs. They're now looking at the United States Central Command. Is that correct?
That's pretty much it. They decided in the 1700s we needed an elected military leader. So he is designated the commander-in-chief and is the senior decision maker for military decisions. And the next step down is the Secretary of War, now Pete Hegseth. And from there, command goes to the commanders-in-chief, or the SINCs. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs is named chairman rather than commander, because he has no command influence over anybody other than his staff of about 120. And that was done on purpose because the founding fathers did not want a military guy to be in charge of the military forces and possibly overthrow the elected government. Now, the National Security Strategy is a document. It's about 30 pages long that's approved by the president each term. And it outlines our goals and how we're going to achieve them. And one of those, of course, is the continued survival and safety from military attack and hostile foreign influence. So that sets the overall stratospheric game board. And then you look at the outcome. And in this case, the outcome is to ensure our safety and security through the elimination of Iran's nuclear weapons ambitions. And of course, their intercontinental ballistic missile capability. The next major document is the Unified Command Plan. This is a secret document, but it outlines the division of the world into a number of geographical areas. And the one in the middle there, orange, is Central Command. They've got the Mideast. Within each one of those major geographical areas, there is a congressionally approved 4-star flag officer, a general or an admiral, and he and his staff are responsible for assessing the threat throughout their area of responsibility, developing plans to counter the threat, deciding on what kind of forces are necessary, and those forces are supplied by the Department of the Army, Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, and any others. And then he is responsible for conducting training exercises and, as you see right now, for employing those forces. So that's the chain of command that goes down there. And what they'll do is identify some centers of gravity with the enemy. And these can be leaders, command and control, communications, key ports, could be key bridges, whatever. And then they'll assess the threats to our own forces so that we can develop counters to each one of those.
Now, Bob, let me ask, what role do the secretaries of the individual branches of the services play? Do they have any role in this, or are they more or less an administrator of the individual branch of the service and not really in the wartime effort?
Yeah, good question. The individual services have separate responsibilities from the SYNC, and their responsibility primarily is to recruit and train forces and organize them into units. It could be carrier task forces, it could be Army divisions and corps, and those units are available to be assigned to the SYNCs as the mission requires. They're also responsible for sustaining their forces when they're in the field.
Now, logistics is your forte. So the logistical operations, I guess, does that come straight out of the Pentagon? And then once all that's arranged, Central Command takes it over? Or does Central Command work on the logistics side of things?
In practice, it's a team effort, but the services have primary responsibility for sustaining their forces. So they know what kinds of supplies are necessary in terms of what kinds of fuels, a horde of different kinds of munitions, pieces of equipment to be replaced, maintenance of it, and they have depot systems that will acquire that from civilian industry and store it and then issue it out to supply units in the field, and it'll go from corps support commands down to division support commands, or in case of the Navy, they've got bases around the world where they will receive supplies that have been acquired by the Department of the Navy from industry, and they will move those to these bases. And in some cases, the ships will come into the base to replenish, and the Navy is very adept at replenishment at sea, where they'll have supply vessels coming alongside and transferring materiel from the support ship to the other ships. The Air Force operates more similarly to the Army, but since they usually have fixed bases, they've got a pretty robust supply distribution network as well.
It's kind of phenomenal that you can fly a B-2 from Missouri to drop a bomb on Iran. That's the practical way to handle things. Just phenomenal.
Steve, there is no country in the world that has the ability to project power and sustain it overseas like the United States. None come close.
Oh, and it's a well orchestrated. That B-2 doesn't take off and fly over there without tanking.
Right.
Probably
multiple times.
Multiple times. Probably 5-6 times to get himself there. Those tankers have to be positioned all the way along that. So those tankers have to be out there.
Let me ask you this. You're a naval man. So how do you we saw in the preload all those ships where they're stationed in the Mediterranean, Persian, Arabian Sea, all over the place, Persian Gulf even. How in the world do you get that much hardware and that many people so coordinated across the board and get them acting in concert with one another? I mean, just logistically getting the ships to where they need to be seems like a pretty awesome task. But what's the level of coordination in terms of working all those different vessels in concert with one another?
The planning that goes into that is incredible. Of course, the Navy that we have now is nowhere near the size of the Navy they had during World War II, and they were able to do it back then as well.
Without computers and spreadsheets.
Without computers. You have to have exceptionally well-trained personnel, both officer and enlisted. You have to have excellent leadership, and that goes all the way from your junior enlisted all the way to your senior officers and your civilian cadre as well. That works well in democracies.
Right.
Does not work quite as well in dictatorships, as we're seeing in the world now with the Chinese and especially the Russians there. But the level of coordination, the planning, that these exercises that where these ships got there, this planning was done years ago. Where we do it in the military all the time. We war game it. What would you do if we had a war, say, with Iran? Well, let's sit down and let's come up with a plan and see what happens. How many ships are we going to need there? What kind of weapons are they going to need? How much fuel? How much food? How long can you keep those personnel out there? And that's one of the problems we're having with those ships now. Those sailors have been out there for a long time. They're ready to go home.
Well, just the basics. I mean, take the number of people on an aircraft carrier, and they've all got to eat. Just supplying food to keep the people going on that aircraft carrier, much less all the military hardware and munitions and everything else you put on there. And then, if you need something, you've got to have a triage unit and be able to do all the medical services. And it's just like a miniature city almost, isn't it?
Well, and not only that, and the morale of those soldiers and sailors is very important as well. And leadership plays a major part in that, of keeping those people motivated to do the job they need to do. And that's where leadership comes in.
Steve, there was one aircraft carrier that had been on station just before the Gulf War started, and it was headed back to its home port in, I think, Japan. And the Gulf War broke, and it got reversed and sent back, was on station for the better part of a year, and they did not have a single fatality. You figure you've got 5,000 people on that aircraft carrier. You've got youngsters from 18 to 24 is probably the bulk of the sailors. These guys are conducting 24-hour flight deck operations. So you're 20 feet from a twin-engine jet aircraft taking off. I wouldn't even want to be 100 feet from an aircraft at Atlanta Airport, much less on a moving aircraft carrier. These guys have been working. They're tired. They're missing their families. They're missing births and holidays and birthdays and so forth. And the leadership and the commitment of these young men and women was extraordinary to achieve that record.
And it is very hard on families. My first deployment on a destroyer was 9.5 months. You get back, I got sent to a 3-month school. Well, the next cycle was supposed to be a year, but since the deployment was supposed to be 6 months, well, we cut into our home port time by 3 months. I spent another 3 months at school, so I was only home 6 months before we went out on another 7-month deployment. And it is very, very hard on families, and for the commitment that these young people have to do this is extraordinary.
When you talk about the overall planning on that, that starts with the commander-in-chief of CENTCOM, Central Command down in Tampa at MacDill Air Force Base, expressing his intent so that everybody who has some piece of the pie there to contribute does so knowing what's in the boss's head. And he'll write out, here is my intent to achieve this result through these means in there. It's a small paragraph. And because he's not going to be able to answer every single question. But as the staff levels look at their role in this, and you'll get the war fighters out there with the fast-moving jets, the combatant naval vessels, and fortunately we don't have any ground forces that are involved other than those operating in bases in some of our coalition partner countries. And they will start filling that in. You have numerous meetings to get this together. And this is not all just happening at CENTCOM, because we've got the IDF that we're working with. When we use the term joint operations, those are operations that involve more than one surface. We've got the Navy, we've got the Air Force, we've got Space Command, we've got Cyber Command, we've got Transcom in there. And when you use the term combined, you're talking about operations that involve more than one country. So this is a combined joint operation. It's got to be done in secrecy. So all of that elevates the complexity of the operational planning and the need for top flight personnel that can work within those constraints.
Well, Dennis, we've got two aircraft carriers in play here. We've got the USS Gerald Ford, which is in the Mediterranean Sea near Israel. We've got the USS Abraham Lincoln. It's in the Arabian Sea near Oman. What kind of aircraft are on those carriers? What types of armaments are they using? And can you give us a little insight on what their strategic role is in the operation?
In this particular operation here, your typical carrier air wing was going to have four squadrons of. It'll have usually two squadrons of F-18s, E's and F's, one squadron of F-35s. Then you'll have another squadron of F-18Gs, which is your electronic warfare. Then you're going to have electronic warfare planes, your command and control airplanes, your E-2s, and then various support aircraft. Now, and in some cases, you're going to have drones that are using now as tankers. I don't think they have that many of them right now. They're using the F-18 as tankers. But I think in this particular situation here, I think every tanker that we had in the United States is over there. I know in Salt Lake City there, the Air National Guard tankers, there's no tankers there. I was talking to my brother. He lives outside the Hill Air Force Base there in Utah, where the F-35s are. There's no F-35s there. They're all over there. So I don't think the Navy is using their shipboard tankers. I think they're using the Air Force tankers to tank them. They'll take off, loaded with bombs or whatever munitions they're using. They'll tank, and then they'll head out. Now the first airplanes you're sending out there is going to be
now Dennis, let me just say, just for people listening, because we're getting into some terminology that they may not understand. So when you say they'll tank, you're talking about they're refueling in midair. So there's a large
because when you take off, you're probably not as loaded. You want to, because of the being able to get airborne, you're probably not loaded out completely with fuel. So as soon as you take off, you're going to hook up to the tanker, and he's going to fill you up full of gas so you can get to where you're going. Now, the first planes you're going to head out there are going to be your F-18Gs, your electronic warfare to jammed communications. They're going to be what we call SEAD, suppression of enemy air defenses. They're going to be knocking out their radars, the anti-aircraft. Now, we have so many Air Force assets out there. The Air Force has F-15s that can do that same job. So those airplanes will be out there. Now, the F-35s will go in and actually knock those out.
And the F-35 is a stealth fighter, is that correct?
It's a stealth fighter, what we call a fifth-generation fighter.
Okay.
It's going to open the path so your F-18s and your F-15s, which are fourth-generation fighters, now they're going to go in there and be able to destroy the sites that they're doing. Now you hear that there's F-22s over there. Yes, they are. F-22s are strictly fighters. They're out there making sure that if the Iranians, I can't imagine them putting up any aircraft. It was in the news just a little while ago that the Qataris said they shot down two Su-34 Iranian jets. I'd like to see the markings on the wreckage of those planes to see exactly where they came from.
I saw a report that said that the Iranians were still using some F-14s back from the old Shah days or something like that.
F-4 Phantoms from Vietnam.
Yeah.
And then they had a MiG-29, somebody said, on one of the fields sitting out there.
those planes, if they're even operational, not going to be able to do much. I mean, it was a great movie there with Tom Cruise in his last Top Gun, where he got into a fully loaded, fully armed, fully fueled, fully operational F-14. Made a great movie. I guarantee you that doesn't exist anywhere in Iraq.
And I'd be very surprised if they had any of the electronic, the countermeasure, and weapons upgrades that have come since the Vietnam days on their aircraft there.
Now, initially, they're going to use their long-range missiles on the targets. Now, we only have so many of those, and they are very expensive. But they will use those to make sure that their air defenses are suppressed, that anybody that can shoot at them is suppressed. Once they have total air superiority, we control the air. Now you can send in the F-15s, maybe even some F-16s, F-18s in there, and drop heavy bombs, which are much less expensive, with making sure you can get back. Now, as far as I know, none of our airplanes have been damaged or shot down by the Iranians.
Now,
the Kuwaitis managed.
Let me ask you this question: use on a technological basis, how far away can one of these jet fighters fire a missile away from a target and hit the target?
Well, it depends on what the target. Depends on if it's but it depends on the target. Are you trying to shoot down an airplane, or are you trying?
Well, I'm saying a surface target on the ground.
On average, it's probably shoot a missile out 100 to 200 miles.
Yeah,
depending on what the missile is.
So it's not like the movies where I've got to put eyes on a building and fire something to take out that building. I'm actually firing from miles and miles away.
Well, what we have is what we call a kill chain. And now, when that airplane, it could be a B-2, B-52, we call them missile trucks. And what they are, they're just loaded with these long-range missiles. We put some of those missiles on, the F-18s and F-35s as well. And you have the kill chain, maybe another airplane out there that's targeting, a satellite that's out there targeting. You may have assets on the ground, Navy SEALs or Delta Force down there, or even Mossad down there that is targeting that force. Generally, those missiles can't fly all that way. Now, they can, but they're going to be a whole lot more accurate if you're following the kill chain.
Now, when you're talking about targeting, that's like putting a laser beam on the target.
Yes.
Yeah. So ground forces can put a laser on it, and the munition will follow the laser in and destroy it.
Yeah, but it's following that kill chain all the way along till it gets it. Now, what we try to do in the military is when the bad guys are shooting at us, we don't have to shoot down the missile. All we have to do is disrupt the kill chain. If we can interrupt, the satellite communication, well, now the missile doesn't know where to go, or it's not going to be nearly as accurate.
So the people on the ground are using some sort of laser device to sight the target. It goes up to a satellite, comes back down to the plane, and the plane fires. Is that essentially how it works?
That's one way of doing it, yes. Now, I guarantee you that the Mossad was on the ground when they knew where the Ayatollah was, that they vectored that ammunition in there.
Yes. Now,
in some cases, the missile will follow the laser, and it doesn't have to go up to a satellite.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the B-2 bombers, there's been a lot of talk by several pundits about using the bombers and going ahead and finishing off those nuclear facilities that are, in mountain. Pickaxe Mountain is one of them. I forgot the name of the other one, but they're heavily embedded in the rock structure. You think that's a possibility? If the Iranians don't fall quickly, they're going to go ahead and take those.
Well, they've already deployed them. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs was given a briefing today, let us know that they'd already used those, and they'd go after those kind of targets. Yeah.
Well, and the Iranians have these huge tunnels where they've stored hundreds of these rockets and missiles. Now, you don't have to destroy the whole tunnel. All you have to do is destroy the entrance. And some of these tunnels have other ways of getting out. Well, you need to find those entrances too and seal those up as well. That's what you're going to use the B-2s for. Now, what you're also seeing here, we have such an overwhelming force that we are bringing to bear on it, much, much more than we need to do the job that we're doing. What you're seeing is there's no better training, like Churchill said when he was fighting in Africa in the late 1890s. He says there's no greater feeling or surge that you can get than being under fire and knowing that you're probably not going to get hit. Well, I think what you're seeing here is the military is looking at that and we're saying, hey, we're going to put you in combat, as many assets as we can. Everybody, everywhere, we're going to put you there so you can feel what it's like to be in combat and not probably not get shot down. Just for the training. China doesn't have anything like that. The Russians, they certainly don't have anything like that except for some of their infantry. There's no other force in the world other than the Israelis that can say we have not only a well-trained force, but we have a force that has actually seen combat. And that is a big deal.
And that's controlling the skies. It doesn't necessarily allow you to control the ground, which is a whole different situation.
Completely different.
And we're relying, and I've watched Hegseth and President Trump both talk about to the Iranian people, it's your time to do something. I think you've got to have something in your hand that resembles some sort of automatic weapon to take advantage of that time, because I don't think the Revolutionary Guard, at least not now, is going to give up the ground. Do you think?
What you're going to have there, you're going to have a period of chaos for probably some time. The regime was held in power. There's millions of people that supported that regime.
Right.
There's millions more that hated it. But the millions that supported the regime are the ones that have the guns. Now, what I think you're probably going to see happen when this falls is your normal citizens are probably better stay hunkered down inside their basements for a while. Because as the dust settles and the fog of war clears, I think you're going to see factions that come out. You're going to have the A-type personalities that are going to come out and take charge of probably factions. You're going to have the Kurds up in the north. You're going to have other, essentially, gangs with guns. You're going to probably see some of these IRGC factions break away and say, hey, we're going to be over in this part of the country and we're going to control this. That's all we can do right now. And I think you're going to probably see fighting between these various factions until the dust settles. You're not going to see liberal Democrats come out and say, okay, let's all get together and have elections and everything's going to be great. I don't think you're going to see that for a long.
Well, the Supreme Leader made a huge mistake, called a meeting of the leadership in broad daylight, above ground, in a single space. And Mossad found out that information. They ramped the operation forward to take advantage of that. It paid off in a big way. Iran then retaliated by firing missiles into neighboring Middle Eastern nations. Now, some people are saying that was another miscalculation from the Iranians. Do you agree?
I think, as it turns out, absolutely, it was a miscalculation. But I think one of their thoughts may have been, you've got these white Satans in bases in these various Gulf states in there. We hate them, death to America. You probably do too. We're going to shoot at the bases, and then you can go in there and help us get the Americans out. And it's kind of like Putin saying, hey, when we invade Ukraine, the Ukrainians are going to welcome us with open arms because they're basically Russians at heart. Big miscalculation on both Putin and Khamenei.
Well, let me ask you this. There's a lot of talk of watching to see if Iran tries to cut off shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, or if there are proxies in Yemen. The Houthis tried to pursue shipping again in the Arabian Sea. Obviously, protecting the flow of oil is paramount to the world economy. We have the ability to fight off the people, the Houthis on the peninsula down in their area, and the Iranians off of their coast. Do we have the ability to fight off them far enough back that they can't interfere with the shipping?
Of course we do, but it's very, very easy to mine that area. All you have to do is put out a broadcast from the Iranians saying, we just mined the Straits of Hormuz. They may not have laid a single mine. All they have to do is say they did. Well, insurance rates are going to go up for those ships immediately if they don't cancel it. If you're a ship captain there, you can think, I'm not sure I want to go through there until I know the Navy's gone out there and cleared it. And of course, we can come out and say, well, they didn't lay any mines there. Well, it's going to slow down things for a while. They could lay just one mine, and it could be a fake one. And they say, well, we found a mine, and it's very easy to do that. Now, to actually mine it, which is what they would have to do, that's very difficult. Now, one of the things, and I was watching this when the president was saying, hey, we're going after the Navy immediately. Yes, that's why you go after the Navy. you sink the Navy so they can't go out there and lay mines. Now, one thing that will probably happen, the Houthis, they can start shooting missiles again at the ships that are going through there. I think you'll probably see that. Hezbollah is already launching rockets back into Israel. I think the problem, and they still have hundreds of thousands of rockets there. The Hezbollah does,
but you know,
Israel probably pound them pretty good.
I can't help but wonder if the circumstances as we see them today acts as a green light for the Saudis and others who have been plagued by the Houthis in Yemen to go ahead and take care of business, and nobody's going to say anything.
They don't have the capability to do it.
They don't.
No,
I know they have some of our aircraft, right?
They have some of our aircraft.
They can't use it to take them out.
Well, here's the deal. I can give you a Stradivarius violin, and you know it can be played very well. One thing you know, you can't play it. It doesn't matter if you give all these guys all these sophisticated weapon systems. If you don't know how to tactically employ it very well, then it really doesn't matter. We did the war gaming a few years ago at the Command and Staff College there where Russia invaded Poland. And we assumed that their equipment was well maintained, that they were well trained, and that they could implement it strategically and tactically well. And we were shocked when they say, well, these guys, they don't know anything. Well, the Saudis are in much the same situation. They've got the stuff. Can they tactically employ it that well? Remains to be seen. The will to employ it. Muslims like this don't like to kill other Muslims. We see that a lot. They'd rather have us do it.
Well, I know the United States and Israel hit 1,000 targets in 24 hours.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine how many aircraft that takes and the coordination that takes, because I'm assuming you've got IDF aircraft in the air at the same time that you've got the American aircraft in the air. Then you're throwing in some Tomahawks and various other things.
Most of those targets were hit with Tomahawk missiles.
Yeah.
And you'll sort that out, Steve, they'll develop an air tasking order every 24 hours. And the ATO will list all of the aircraft, and you're talking Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, IDF, any other coalition partners, all of their aircraft, what their capabilities are, what kind of munitions you want them to have on there, what targets they're going to hit, when they take off, what route they take to the target, and when they come back. And as Dennis alluded to earlier, you'll send the suppression of enemy air defense aircraft in first. That's got to be coordinated. Then you'll bring in the guys to destroy the targets. You'll have some overhead fighter cover in there. And all of that is a very complex order that's updated every 24 hours, the air tasking order. It's a very complicated business, and we do it very well.
And deconfliction, not only working with the Israelis, but we have all those other countries there. And you can see they had a deconfliction problem when the F-15s came back and the Kuwaitis shot them down. And so that was a communications breakdown. Somebody in there didn't tell the Kuwaitis, we got 3 F-15s coming through your airspace.
We're running short on time, so I want to get some short answers from you if I can. NATO, you think we're going to see more support from NATO than what we're getting now?
Yes.
Bobby,
They're
you agree?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Mossad has shown their worth, shown that they're one of the best intelligence agencies in the world. Do you think it's the United States and the Israelis' ability to gather vital intelligence that could make this conflict end a lot sooner than people think?
It will, but this is going to go on for a while. This is going to go on for a while. It's several weeks at least.
Now, General David Petraeus, I saw an interview with him. He said the most important issue in this conflict is missile math, meaning, do we know how many missiles Iran has remaining? And do the United States, Israel, and the neighboring nations have enough capacity to keep shooting them down? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, also, where are they storing them? Where are the sites that launch them? What's Mossad and our ability to determine those locations and take them out so you don't have a lot of that missile mass coming at you that you've got to expend your munitions for?
I'll give you an example. During World War II, the missile was in the Pacific War was the aircraft carrier. Most aircraft carrier battles between the Japanese only lasted a day to a day and a half, 2 days. Why? They ran out of airplanes. A third of them got shot down in combat. A third of them just ran out of gas going back to the carrier. Another third of them, they got downed in training accidents. Okay, that the battle's over, no airplanes. Well, now we run into the same thing. When we war game these things, generally, depending on how aggressive you are, the battle's over in 1 day, at most 3 days, because both sides have run out of missiles.
Okay.
One dimension of all this, Steve, that we haven't talked about is risks. And I'm happily surprised that we haven't seen a move by either Russia or China to involve themselves to some degree or another. I mean, in Vietnam, the Russians had transport ships there in Haiphong Harbor, which barred the administration from destroying some of that. We haven't seen any of that, and hopefully we won't. I don't know what the Chinese response will be to the diminished oil supply that I suspect they're going to be running into Venezuela.
The Chinese are going to be putting heavy pressure on the Iranians not to close the Straits of Hormuz, because that's where they're getting a lot of their oil from. Now, will they still keep getting oil? Absolutely, except now they're going to have to start paying market prices. Russia is far too involved in Ukraine to have anything to do with what's going on.
Let's talk casualties real quick. We're doing this interview on March 2nd in the afternoon, and as of now, 4 service members dead. We just had a fourth one that succumbed to the injuries. All in all, with this type of operation, that's astounding, isn't it?
I mean, with the number of people that are involved in carrier operations and so forth, the age of these people, the rate of activity in there, you could probably take that number of people to a small, similarly sized city in the United States and have more traffic accidents. That's not to make light of it. That is the most important aspect of the conflict to those families, and it should be.
Now, we've lost several aircraft, but we've lost those aircraft to friendly fire. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was primarily what air defense systems that we had in Kuwait were triggered and fired on our jets.
Well, Kuwaitis, it was deconfliction. Kuwaitis saw these targets coming in. They didn't know what they were. Somebody got an itchy trigger finger and shot them down.
That's part of the training that you allude to. And, how does that translate to the Saudis going after the Houthis in there? That's one dimension that you've got to work into your planning on the whole thing. And, all in all, I think it's a necessary operation. When people, and I've seen some congressmen oppose it, I'd say, what's your alternative? I mean, we've been since 1979 dealing with these people. They're pushing the can down the road. And Churchill had an interesting quote in 1932 when he was looking at the war clouds in Germany rebuilding after the Treaty of Versailles. And he said that France, though armed to the teeth, is pacifist to the soul. They had more tanks, more aircraft, a much bigger army, and could have absolutely put the kibosh on Hitler's aspirations, but they didn't.
Well, let's finish on this. Unarmed civilians. How do you get regime change? Excuse me. With unarmed civilians And what happens if the Revolutionary Guard does fall with the governance vacuum? Because the theocracy was the government. What do you think? Final thoughts.
Oh, you're going to have chaos there for a while until they get it sorted out. You're going to have various factions arise that are going to try and take control of various areas, and could be a civil war. More than likely, you're going to see a divided country with various areas controlled by various factions, with not one unified government.
Syria may be an example of how things fall out. Hopefully, you wouldn't have a civil war going that long, but you finally had one leader that had enough forces behind him that were armed, that battled the government, and finally drove Assad out of the country, and some more fighting, and then he established himself.
One thing we didn't do in Iraq, which was probably deemed a mistake now, was we disemboweled the military there and sent them all in their separate ways, and then they ended up becoming the fighters in the various regions that you're talking about. Would it be better, because the Revolutionary Guard and the military are two separate things in Iran, would it be better to leave the military intact and try to pull the Venezuelan situation where we say, hey, look, if you're willing to do it and you do what we need you to do,
We don't have any
we'll leave you
control
there.
of that.
You
We don't have
probably-
any control of that. You're going to have troops on the ground to do that. We're not putting troops on the
You
ground.
probably explore those through, Marco Rubio and him talking to any leaders that may begin to appear, and see what are your options, which one looks like it may bear most fruit, and pursue that. If it doesn't, then you go to option B or C and see if you. One advantage I think you've got over there is they're a very educated population, and by the size of some of the demonstrations, they recognize the opportunities before them, and let's hope that enough of them can get behind a group or person and turn things around. But I think, as Dennis has said a couple of times, you're going to have some chaos between now and then.
And what results? You may have a group of people in there that we don't like, that aren't very good guys, but as long as they pretty much behave themselves,
If they
that may be good enough.
shy away from their nuclear ambitions,
Well,
that's the threat to us.
It's going to be very interesting what happens. We're a couple days in. The Lebanese border is already on fire. The Hamas has fired rockets into Israel, and Israel's retaliating. Hopefully things don't escalate anymore in the skies of Iran. I think we've got supremacy there.
Here's the thing about war. One of the big things, and hopefully Trump doesn't do this, you need to finish the war. There has to be a definitive end to it, where there is a winner and there is a loser. Wars are won by you kill enough of the enemy and destroy enough of his capability until he quits. Now, too many times we've had politicians step in there and say, well, we need to stop, let's sit down and negotiate. It's like a prize fight. When the bell rings, everybody goes to their corner, they rearm, they get their stuff fixed up again, then the bell rings, and then they come out and box again. You need, once you got them down on the ground, you got to kick them until they quit. And hopefully we'll keep on it until, okay, Iran, you have quit, you have surrendered, you're going to behave, and if you don't behave, we'll come back after you again.
All right, well, that's got it. We're out of time. Very informative, guys. Thank you so much. And as days go on, maybe we'll come back and do some follow-up and see if some of our speculation prognostication turned out to be right on target.
Like Trump says, let's give war a chance.
Yeah, let's. Well, very interesting too. Don't forget this. Let's leave on this. Obviously, China has an incentive to keep the oil flowing from Iran because they're getting a large amount of oil from them. They have influence on Iran because they've been dealing with them over the years. The other thing is Trump has a meeting coming up in China, and a formal official meeting with the Chinese government. And let's see what happens between the United States and China. I can only imagine Trump going in there and telling Xi Jinping, "We did it bigly. We're the best ever. Yeah, there's nothing you can do to us that'll bother us." It will be very interesting to see how that meeting goes.
Agree. Thanks for having us on,
Thanks.
Steve.
Have a great day.
Thank you, guys.